leta Jaramogi ni huu mfumo ambao kwamba sasa hivi tuko nao ya kwa yale ya kwanza ya mambo ya majimbo ambao kwamba niko nao na wenzangu. Kwa moyo mkunjufu nitaomba sikukosa heshima kuwa pamoja wiki nzima hii. Asanteni sana, na kama wanavyosema kwangu mimi Kisumu ni Kisumu dala. Asanteni sana.
Asante sana Gavana. Travel well to Mombasa. Thank you very much. Thank you for the good advice you've given us. Before they do, can I ask Mheshimiwa Moses Kuria, Waziri Moses Kuria, please come over and at least say one or two things to the audience. I know I welcome you to Kisumu, and I'm not going to let you go back to Nairobi today.
Familia ya Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Baba Raila Odinga, Youth Leader ndugu yangu Oburu Odinga, Mama Aida Odinga, Mama Margaret Kenyatta, na watu wa Kisumu, Nyadhuru Auntie, Nyadhuru Umor. Nimekuja hapa kusherehekea hii sherehe ya miaka 30 for one of my early mentors when I was a young man. I remember as a student leader in the University of Nairobi, I met Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. And I remember we were accompanied tulipelekwa kwa Jaramogi na chairman wetu wakati huo, Mheshimiwa TJ Kajwang, who is here. Pia tulikuwa with our Secretary General, Governor Ochilo Yako, who is here today. Na wakati huo Moi alikuwa amekataa kurejista chama chetu cha wanafunzi cha SONU. Na Jaramogi tulipoenda kumuona akatusukuma mpaka hiyo chama yetu ikakuwa registered. I remember one time TJ Kajwang and myself went to see the then Attorney General, Amos Wako, who was here today. And Amos Wako told me, young man, I understand your position, but my hands are tied. And he could not do anything about it. So Amos Wako, I don't know whether he's still around. He was trying to convince us, just accept to be expelled. Mkubali tu mfukuzwe katika university. Wakati tulifukuzwa kutoka university, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga akapiga simu, akatafuta mtu anaitwa Gerard Otieno Kajwang na akamuamurisha aende mpaka at 6 p.m. And that's how I managed to finish my university, courtesy of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. Kabisa. Kabisa. Later, when Jaramogi died, I remember we went to Bondo. We went to Bondo to bury Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. And I remember James Olengo almost took over the funeral ceremony with his famous quote of Mark Antony. 1 year later, during the first Teroburu, when we went to Kangoka Jaramogi, and Moi said that there is not going to be live music. Nakumbuka ilikuwa saa 1 jioni. DC wakati huo alikuwa anaitwa Kirito wa Mai, akatupa tear gas usiku. Nakumbuka tukipitia pahali kuna cactus huko Kangoka Jaramogi, tukiwa na Oburu in a very small hole. So therefore, I come here today to celebrate a legend and to celebrate a part of Kenyan history that shall never be taken away. The challenge we have as we honor Jaramogi today is to be that generation that can make a difference. I believe deep down in my heart that we can relive and relaunch the nationalist credentials that Jaramogi and others lived. It may not be from a monolithic thinking as it was when Jaramogi and Kenyatta teamed up. It may not be from the same political party, but we can have an agreement on things that we can never have a dispute about. We can agree on a set of ideals that brings Kenya together. May God rest Jaramogi Oginga Odinga in eternal peace. Asante sana.
Asante sana, Waziri Moses Kuria. Can we have order in the house, please? Tafadhali. Asante sana. Asante sana. Now we are going to have presentations from abroad from 4 scholars in Great Britain and the US who have studied Kenya very well in politics and economics and who knew Jaramogi as many of us do. So I'm going to request them to take 5 minutes each. I hope the electronics is ready for me to call Professor David Thrupp of George Washington University. He will be followed by Professor John Lonsdale of Cambridge University. And then our brother John Kamau, who is a well-known journalist in Kenya, but currently is doing his postgraduate studies and in Toronto, writes very good articles in the papers, well-researched and from archives and so on. And finally, from Professor Robert Mason of West Virginia University. So first, let me request Professor David Thrupp of George Washington University to come on, please. Please listen to him very carefully. Pay attention as Professor David Thrupp addresses you for 5 minutes, followed by the others. Thank you.
Gentlemen, I only met Jaramogi once when he was campaigning to honor him today.
De la Cour constitutionnelle.
I think you can divide his career into 6 phases. First, the period of his education at Messina, the Alliance High School, Makerere, and then back to teach at Messina. And that period demonstrated, I think, his willingness to stand up and challenge authority in 2 famous confrontations with Carrie Francis. First as a pupil at Messina, and then just before he went to Makerere over Carrie Francis's appointment as the new headmaster of the Alliance High School. The second period is, I think, extremely important and underestimated. And that is the period from 1945 until he was elected to the Legislative Council in 1957, when he revived, along with Walter Odede and Achieng Oneko, the Luo Union, and played a pivotal role in the formation of LUTATCO, the Luo Thrift and Trading Corporation. And it was during these years, 1945 to 1957, that he really captured the influence over the Luo community. First, as representative of the emerging Luo elite, but also representing the voice of the have-nots of Kisumu, and perhaps most importantly, as the spokesman of the Luo peasantry. It was his critique of soil conservation measures and stocking and cattle dipping I think, in the 1940s and 1950s, defending traditional peasant principles that catapulted him into the position of Ger and leader of the Luo community, a position that in many respects he was to hold until his death in 1994. The third phase, and the one that we all know about, but which I'm going to talk about perhaps in a little more detail, echoing Michael Chege, is the period of the struggle for KANU, the struggle from his election to the Legislative Council in 1957 until he resigns as Vice President of KANU and Vice President of Kenya to form the Kenya People's Union in 1966. 1958, as has been mentioned, is a pivotal year, pivotal speech, when he says that the real leader of the Kenyan nationalist movement is Jomo Kenyatta, and that the rest of us sitting here in the Legislative Council are really merely his representatives. And Kenyatta has to be released to play his rightful role in Kenyan politics. But that relationship became tested. And as early as January 1964, it was already evident at the time of the Lynette coup in the KAR that Kenyatta had become a little bit more suspicious of Odinga, of the Jaramogi. And that concern, that suspicion grew at the end of the year on Jamhuri Day, December 1964, when Kenyan African Democratic Union disbanded, was incorporated into KANU, and changed the balance of ideological forces within the ruling party. The 12th of December 1964, of course, is also the date when Oginga Odinga took Jomo Kenyatta to open the Lumumba Institute, which was to be a training school for KANU officials. And in May 1965, on the graduation of the first class from the Lumumba Institute, they made the mistake, a fatal mistake, I think, looking back, to seize control of KANU headquarters, to proclaim that the leadership of KANU, apart from Kenyatta and Odinga, had all been dismissed, and to usher in a left-wing platform. That event, May 1965, marked in many ways the end of Jaramogi's personal relationship with President Kenyatta. At the same time, of course, you have the rumors about the Russian ship providing weapons and supplies, being shadowed by the Royal Navy, and coming into the port of Mombasa. In fact, of course, it arrived first in Dar es Salaam. If there were any weapons, they were unloaded, and then subsequently made its way into Mombasa, where it was quarantined, it was searched, government ministers were searched, and so on. And that was the final blow. And we can see that by the issuing the following month of Sessional Paper Number 10, the famous commitment in Kenya to African socialism. And it being quite clear that African socialism in Kenya represented something very different from African socialism and the Arusha Declaration and Ujamaa in Tanzania. It was much more friendly to capitalism. It marked, if you like, the culmination of the final blow to the Jaramogi standing inside the inner circles around Kenyatta. But having said all that, I want to refer to what Michael Chege said. And I want to talk in particular about the Information Research Department at the Foreign Office and its dirty tricks section, the Special Editorial Unit, which in these crucial years, 1964-65, produced 4 black operations against Odinga. The first of which, in September 1965, saw the publication of a story, revolution document in Kenya, in the Daily Telegraph, which had allegedly been issued by something called the People's Front of East Africa, and which alleged that Jaramogi was to be brought to power by a recently formed People's Revolutionary Socialist Party. This story was completely concocted by the British, and it sent out 80 copies, which it hoped would be caught and published in the press. In fact, there was a major story in the Daily Telegraph which wanted to get back at Jaramogi for expelling their correspondent from Nairobi. And there were other fabrications, other pieces of what we would now call fake news, claiming that he was a tool of the Chinese and so on. The story of British propaganda operations in Kenya is a reminder that the days of a declining empire were not as much pomp and circumstance as deception, disinformation, and dirty tricks. At its heart was an effort by London to continue to exert control over a former colony well after it had become independent. And Jaramogi was the great victim. The fourth, fifth, and sixth phases I won't really talk about. They're well known. There's the KPU phase, 1966 to 69. There's the era of detention and house arrest and the failed political comeback in 1980, 1982. 2 decades, really, of frustration and years of wilderness. And finally, you have the campaign for multi-party politics. If Ford had not split, if Kenneth Matiba had not pulled it asunder, they might well have won. They already had 63 seats in the 1992 election. If you combine Matiba and Jaramogi's vote, it comes to 42% compared to the 36% by Daniel Arap Moi. But in all probability, of course, the election would have been rigged even more. There would have been even greater violence. But I want to end by giving you a thought. If the Jaramogi and Ford had won, and Ford had remained united, and Jaramogi had become Kenya's third president in January 1963, Kenneth Matiba would have succeeded to the presidency on January the 20th, 1994, 30 years ago today.
Okay, thank you so much, David.
Would have been very different.
The subsequent speakers to hold on to the 5 minutes limit. We shall request you subsequently to send us these papers, even the ones that have been given here today, so that we can have a follow-up publication of this 30 years memorial of Jaramogi. I know we have a lot to say, but it is now 5 o'clock in the afternoon, evening in Kenyan time, and we still have one more panel to go through. So I'll try to make it as short as possible for the remaining speakers. My friend John Lonsdale from Cambridge University, can we hear from you the next 5 minutes? And then you can send us your speech so that we can publish it. John?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm very grateful indeed to have been asked to attend this meeting.
John?
And also greatly honoured. And I'm delighted. Family from many distinguished contributors. I will speak very briefly. My former student, David Throop, is not known for his conciseness. I shall be very much more concise than him. I just want to take up what others have said about Odinga's rootedness. I met him once only a long, long time ago when I was a research student at Kisumu in 1963. When Odinga, as others, were campaigning, he was very busy. He swept by. I managed to say hello, and that was about it. But the point I want to make is that the person I found most interesting to talk to around Kisumu in 1963 was a wonderful old man.
Recording in progress.
Olola. And John Paul Olola was the farmer at what used to be called the Native Farm at Kibos. He was, I think, Odinga's business mentor in founding the Luo Thrift and Trading Corporation and the bus company. So that Odinga grew up, I think, in an atmosphere of extraordinary intellectual depth and interest, surrounded by people like John Paul Olola, a generation older than him. And I think that Olola, I mean, he showed me cuttings he had made of the East African Standard in the 1920s. He kept up with settler politics. He showed me letters that he had written as an agricultural instructor in, I think, 1914, complaining to the district commissioner that the Luo chiefs were not planting the kind of seeds that he was recommending. Odinga was himself a great man, but he was, I think, the child of great people. And I think that if we really want to understand him, then we need to understand a great deal more and record a great deal more about how the Luo themselves responded in such an extraordinarily creative way to the challenges of colonial rule. I want people like John Paul Olola to be remembered as much as Odinga. With that, I will hand it back to other people who remember very much more about Odinga than I do, a man I have always admired. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, John. Very much like you, concise and to the point. Please say hello to your colleagues in Cambridge. Now, let me turn to John Kamau. John is a journalist, but currently is doing postgraduate work in Toronto. Has done a lot of archival work on Kenyan politics and economics. John, please, can you come on?
Thank you. I hope you can hear me all.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you so much. And I'm very happy for the Odinga family for organizing this panel and also these meetings. I'll be quite quick. I've done quite some work on Jaramogi, and one thing that I always say is that we need to understand Jaramogi within the wider framework of international Black thinkers, the intellectuals, and the activists who are emerging to question the legitimacy of colonial rule and the racism that was existing, and the perception of Blacks as backward. And he was in the league of great visionaries like Kwame Nkrumah, Kenyatta, Abdel Nasser, Julius Nyerere, all people who are against the creation of an equal society. And I try to look at him from that international perspective, because the kind of he was engaging in fighting against a system of domination and exploitation. And if you listen keenly to him, and if you read his book, Not Yet Uhuru, you're going to see that this is not the story of Kenya alone. It is a story of unfinished business of liberation in Africa. And having been born at a time when the sun was never setting on the empire, I think he took it as his duty to make sure that by the time of his death, the sun will have set on the empire. But also, the empire also struck back, and Professor David Throop has talked about the kind of response in which what the empire did. And those who look at the propaganda system and the way it worked with the British intelligence, I think having failed to create Jaramogi to become a loyalist or to become in their own image, to create a man in their own image, they turned against him, and they made sure that they turned against him, and they made sure that the only thing that they could do was to satanize Odinga, the way they satanized everybody else who was against the empire. And to do this, I think we need to reflect so much on the works of the Information Research Department and their data campaigns in Africa and in other places where they started this misinformation campaign. And that's what worries me, is that we fell into this trap of this misinformation. And even up to this moment, we are still trapped into some of the politics of this misinformation and the Black propaganda, which was started by the British. And they forced us to start looking inward to an extent that a great nation like Kenya would think on the politics of genital modification, would think about the politics of genital modification as one of the ways in which to determine leadership. And this, I find that to be quite absurd for a great nation like Kenya. And again, when you look at the workings of the black propaganda, or what even the troop has talked about it, the fake news and propaganda articles, there's a new book by Jim Barnes on one of the MI5, MI6 personnel who was working in Nairobi. His name was Walter Bell. And this book, which was released this year, it talks about how Walter Bell started working with Jomo Kenyatta. Kenyatta didn't know so much that he was being fine-tuned for some of this propaganda. And Walter Bell worked so much with Kenyatta. And part of the misinformation about the coup, Odinga coup and all that, it reaches Kenyatta's desk. And even the papers by the People's Revolutionary Kenya Socialist Party, most of these propaganda papers, they reach Kenyatta. And he started being suspicious of Odinga. And so a wedge is being created through this machinery. The other thing which we fail sometimes to remember is that Odinga is an internationalist. He had set up what was known as the Kenya office in Cairo. And few people recall the Kenya office in Cairo. And this is where he was reaching out to international figures like Abdel Nasser for help in the Kenya's liberation. And we had people like Odhiambo Okello, Owera Abido, Abdullah Karungo, Kamwithi Munyi. All these people who were working towards emancipating the Black Africa. And they were with the help of Abdel Nasser. So we find that Jaramogi was a deliberate internationalist. Deliberate in that he was reaching out to all those people who could help. And that is why you find his friends included people like Kwame Nkrumah, Tito of Yugoslavia, Mao, Khrushchev, all these people, if you read his book, they had meetings with him. And the other thing which I want to touch quite briefly, and I know I think had we had time we could have talked about it, is about the Jaramogi airlifts. When we talk about airlifts, people are always talking about the US airlifts.
Okay, thank you so much, John.
Okay, thank you so much.
There's an announcement to be made here, please. Can you make a quick announcement?
Thank you, Prof. I wish to remind that we are here on a very important intellectual discourse. All movement behind the dignitaries must stop. Madam, you cannot be selling calendars at this time. That one is not possible. All security officials, people are seated behind you for a good reason. You can't be standing in front of people who are seated. God has given us a sound mind and we must use it, especially here. Kindly, Calvo, kila mtu aliyesimama hapo aondoke. Na wewe mzee uliyesimama mbele ya kamera, tunakuomba uketi. Na tusalie watulivu, tusikilize maswala yanayozungumziwa hapa. Professor.
Thank you very much. We have the last speaker on Zoom, Professor Robert Mason of West Virginia. And I'm requesting Robert to observe the 5-minute rule because we have our last panel yet to come and it's already 5:10. Thank you very much, Bob.
Advice. Starting just by recalling the times that I...
Can we, Robert, on please?
Yes.
Those people that don't, please, can you go out or keep quiet and sit down, please? Please respect us as we respect you. Tafadhali. Tafadhali. Okay, John, Robert, please.
Thank you. The first honored in a speech he gave in Kisumu, sponsored by the McCary extramural program, with courses in Western Kenya, and he shared the platform with Musa Amalemba. And this is the first time I've seen Odinga in person. The contrast between he and Malemba in their mode of speaking and dress and their message to us as to the future education of Kenyans was quite a stark contrast. I've never forgotten it. And the message he sent was, of course, we need to focus on an education that reflects the people of Kenya, that is the majority in Kenya, not really based on the colonial education completely, but an African one. Second time I met him was at a friendly soccer match that he based on colonial education completely, but an African one. Second time I met him was at a friendly soccer match that was arranged between North Nyanza and Central Nyanza to welcome Kenyatta and Odinga to Western Kenya. First time Kenyatta visited, Jomo Kenyatta visited as Prime Minister. I had the opportunity to shake hands with him then. But thirdly, when I returned to Kenya in 1968-69 to carry out dissertation research, I was really looking for a place to stay. I found an apartment in America House on Windy Mingo Street, which some of the headquarters as well as the police in obvious and less obvious. Anyway, only one time did I get threatened to be taken to the Central Police Station for going into the building where KPU was. But the example I would like to give would follow up on what Professor Kenya talked about, the 1958 statement in Mexico by Jaramogi that Jomo Kenyatta was the leader of the Kenya's Africans, to remind that in the following year, April of 1959, he made that case directly in the face of the Secretary of State for the Colonies, Lennox Moy, who had been briefed before this meeting. Odinga was leading a delegation from the constituency elected members organization, including African and Asian members of LegCo. Lennox Moy was told he had to push back against those in Kenya who were glorifying Kenyatta, as they briefed put it. He did, but he jumped immediately to defend Kenyatta as a leader of Africans, called for his release, and of course infuriated Lennox Moy, but the die had been cast a few days earlier. He had announced in Parliament that there would be a constitutional conference coming. That was the first Lancaster House Conference.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Robert. And thank you, David. Thank you, Professor Lonsdale. Thank you, John Kamau. Still stay tuned because we are doing the last panel now. And we thank you very much for turning up for this occasion. We now have the last panel, which has those Jaramogi inspired and those Jaramogi mentored. Governor James Orengo will take the last seat because he'll be the last speaker. Dr. Mukisa Kitui, the second last seat. Gitu Kaengeri, you'll go to the third seat. Archbishop Okoth will come to the first seat. And Mama Jael Bogo, will she speak from there? Then she can come to the thing. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, Governor. Governor. Archbishop, you can start, yeah? What's the next second? Okay,
Hey, please, we are in the deep moment of listening to the lectures. Kindly go to the tent.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. We now go to the last panel, and we will start with those.
Hello. Adwani. Security. Sani bura binyi kairi. Adwani mondo odie tent kacha. Kaburu muni. Kaburu. Unye maber. Di udie tent kacha. Urita. Uija. Abiro birko.
And we will start by Archbishop Okoth, who was inspired by Jaramogi. Archbishop Okoth, you're the first. 5 minutes. Okay, we'll have Archbishop now.
All protocols observed. Mine is to state one attribute of Jaramogi, which we seem to forget. Jaramogi was a man of gratitude. Jaramogi was a man of giving thanks. Jaramogi no gono nyasaye erokamano. Mokwongo, kana bedo jabiskop ka. Jaramogi samane kano lotunga gwedha.
Yes.
Jaramogi bene otingo rengo. Kedo picha na ubro neno. Kwa mbo ugwedha. Nyasaye ugwedhowa. Wan gi Jaramogi nokwa los e public. Onge kane waro. Mokwongo anyisou. Kaka Jaramogi nogo na Nyasaye erokamano. Kata chieng' mane iko Kenyatta ne antiere. Kendo ne antie kanyo ka jobiskop marwa rielwedi kuom Kenyatta. When we were praying for State House, Kenyatta in State House, and Jaramogi was passing, he was Raila Odinga. We imechame mari, imodo kiki good.
Yes.
I was there and I had it, and my hands were straight over Mzee Kenyatta. Mano Jaramogi wacho to kado talemu na Kenyatta. And our experiences. Machielo ben awakono ya. Jaramogi no kono Nyasaye erokamano. Mai to kada wacho mang'eny abiro wakono matin. Lawakino matin. Kano tue Jakom 82, 90 years. Mama Aida tung'eyo. Onge gima lando. An mawacho ni amna rwako ne Jakom odeyo ni. Kaluongo ni Father Augustine mwa Machakos. Akete mtoka moro mo olal kode mochopo kae mo lal kode mo kadho kunam modhi yo loka kocha. Moko go kanyisi mang'eny. Jaramogi ni Nyasaye erokamano. Nyasaye ogwedhowa. Mano wan gi Jaramogi. Koro wacho gik mane ok owacho ni mondo winji. That's what Jaramogi was. A man of gratitude to God. Kane weche tek. Kendo wan gi Bishop Okulu ne waromo gi Jaramogi. Sunset Hotel, okay hotel ka. Wadhi wakawo room moro in the upstairs. To wabed kuro sa ariyo adek otieno. Nyaka sa auchiel. Kwa konja muro gi paro. How to get around that section 2A. Mako ne bang'e ne wayudo. Kane gino chopo kare. Jaramogi ne wacho ni Nyasaye ogwedhowa. Nyasaye erokamano. Jaramogi was a man of God. Don't think he was only a fighter of political affairs. He was also a fighter for justice and truth and police. Machielo, mabedo kawaki mang'eny. Kanogi kama koro. Mama Aida bende tich onge gitimore nade. Sano ke nalia komorone kawo nyikwa Jaramogi gi itere school. Muatere school. They learned in Nairobi school. James Orengo knows very well how Alois Opio, his friend, that we just buried the other year, used to take the fees of these black children of Jaramogi and pay them at Consolata school. I told him, don't say whose parents. They are children of God. They go to school. That is all. Jaramogi came to say, Nyasaye erokamano. Nyasaye ogwedhowa. Nyaka ne nwang'o na mondo abed jabiskop. Wach mange Jaramogi nene ma Nyasaye ogwedhowa. Nyasaye erokamano. God has blessed us. Let us thank God. Machielo kane gika makoro. Moi odhi. President Moi biro board. And Moi was there. Jaramogi was there. Jaramogi asked Moi, in an umbrella, kivuli, motingo Kenya te, kel wapi gimat gisitima bondo ka. No winjo kaka negedhino, kaka negedhino. Zaya no mi arieko moro matin, madhi alando go loka, wuothe piny Njirima, adhi pinjo Brussels, bende. Chopo kanyo ero. Koro kano gi kanyo. Wayudo sitima moa Mamboleo Nyakolago. The Mamboleo electricity going to Bondo is a responsibility and my initiative to do that on the request of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. Kendo kano wachopo Bondo, wadhi Nyang'oma, Nyakolago. At Olago itself at the port, I engaged a Jewish water engineer, Adler, that fixed the Olago water project. Jaramogi used to come there every day almost. Jaramogi thanked me and said, Bishop, erokamano. Nyasaye ogwedhowa, Nyasaye erokamano. That water project, no negotiate. Nyakoduok, Nyang'oma, back to Bondo, Keroko Chiko Imbo. Two distribution tanks had to be built on top of the hill. Jaramogi went to the community and asked the people, allow the bishop, let's get a tractor to make a road to the hill, top of Sarafongo Hill. There are 2 water tanks there I built that distributes water back to Nyang'oma, back Kochiko Imbo, back Kadugo Nango Kon. Jaramogi comes and says, Nyasaye ogwedhowa, Nyasaye erokamano. Kada kineno picha, mane wayao kanyo, Malungo bishops my Kenya te came to Nyang'oma Olago side. Wasomo misakanyo. Wagona Nyasaye erokamano. Pi mane oyodo. Sao sakwane onge pi. Jaramogi ne ntiere ma be nengi Jalango Kumo mano luongo ni Ford Kenya roving ambassador. You are there. En kanoki polytechnic. Magara Madungene, Jaramogi was a man of gratitude. He was a political fighter for truth and justice. But where there was no justice, Jaramogi did not hide from me. We did not meet where people meet us. We met in our own small ways, here and there. Sometimes with the Andrew Kulu, think about this and that. But Jaramogi was always a man of gratitude. Let us not go away saying he was only a fighter for, no. He was a fighter for truth and justice and peace. That's what he was. Kanogi Kamoro. Jaramogi Chako. Biro ira kwa na ero Kamoro. Milo mai to kuro angoma timorene. To Kanogi kanyo mane koro idhiko mashime. Justice. Ne anti anamnaike. Jaramogi was allowed to speak. He was not allowed to speak. Tani mana ane vialtar. Sama kurasa mamisa ane commander in chief. Mana alonga na Jaramogi miru uoyo. Mogo na jiyeru kamana. Mwaka na nyasa gwedro. Modo SM utiru. Odhio ikinyara gunga. Note pap moro tuku koja. Jaramogi no gona ero kamana. No gona nyasa ero kamana. Magi agik mwaka mwadwangene ya. Ngema Jaramogi. Ne en gima mnyaka wa respect, wa meyo also gratitude, and wa thank God because
Thank you very much, Archbishop. Indeed, the Ford Kenya slogan was haki na ukweli, because Jaramogi was for truth and justice. Next is Jael Mbogo. Phoebe Asio records in her autobiography that you and her tried to persuade Jaramogi not to resign as vice president. Tell us more.
Thank you. I hope you will excuse me to speak in English a little and mix it where necessary with my mother tongue. My name is Jael Ogombe Mbogo. To the family of Jaramogi and all protocols observed, I come to you today to confirm that that I am one of the products of Jaramogi's mentorship. I was with Mzee from 1958 in Eastlands, Nairobi, which was then known as the natives area. After the death of Ofafa, who are blacks. And that is where we started with Mzee. He was in Ofafa, Jericho. I was in Ofafa, Maringo, F17 as a counselor. We were 6 of us, 5 Africans and 1 Asian, T.S. Nyanandra, represented the Asian community in the city council under the leadership of the lady mayor, who was a European. I was also at the same time working with the City Council in the building department as a secretary. And during the course of my work, there was a lot of happenings. This was the time when Africans were getting ready and fighting hard to achieve our independence. I got involved in many ways because of my skills and service. Through Jaramogi, I learned one principle. That was, you cannot receive money or anything before service. It is service before self, which was very difficult in those days and particularly in these days. You cannot expect anybody to do anything for you without first exchanging money. That was the beginning of and those who wanted back their land. There was agreement for the British to send money to settle the ex-detainees who are being released at that time. When Mzee wrote about Not Yet Uhuru, he had noticed that the money that was coming to compensate the detainees who are being released never reached them at any cost. Instead, there was a company, Kikuyu Land Buying Company, which was charged with raising money to buy land from the Wazungus. But even that did not work properly. Therefore, he was very disappointed. When he saw this and he found out that he could not get his points considered, that's the time he resigned and formed the party, KPU. I wanted to join the party then because he was our leader from Eastlands. Every morning we would be controlled 3-4 times from Ofafa to City Hall. You lie down, you stretch your legs, and you open your mouth. If you have no teeth down here, you get relief. But if you have your teeth, the lower teeth, you are getting in. I was arrested many times because I refused to remove my lower teeth when my time came. Mondonaga, I had to pay the penalty. Marbe dogila kena. Tokoro sani agon Nyasaye erokamano. Nikech lake nago koro wuok kendgi. Mondo kadhi e polo, tayud kuma jaduong' nitiere. E kona ma jolue mabiro dhi e polo. Mano en adiera. Yeah, after that, we moved to the real independence now. We worked very hard. I was given a role to play as a councillor to organize the African community in Nairobi, and particularly women. We hired Kenya Polytechnic, a big hall like this for the whole country, and everyone came with whatever they could show as being attributed to the African culture. This went on, and then I was elected chairperson or president of Maendeleo ya Wanawake. And in this area now, I had very good opportunity of pursuing and studying and following what was happening in the government. And Mzee asked me not to resign from Maendeleo when he formed the party. He refused that I should remain where I am because of the information which I could give relating to the system of government we were following. I worked for almost 10 years, but much more. After everything happened, Mzee, I would say, loved the development of women. He was very particular in every organization or party or committee he formed within the party. He must see the face of women. And this he did not lose sight of until much later on. Come 1991-92, during the formation of Ford Kenya, or Ford Original, he called me personally and asked me to go to the office because he wanted to assign some duties to me. When I arrived there, he told me, I want you to head the Department of Women in the party. And I want you to go out and bring as many women leaders. You have worked with them, you know them, you understand them, and I want them to be the springboard of our struggle in Ford, Kenya, at Ajip House. I did exactly that. The first person I called was Wamboi Otieno, who was a personal friend of mine. Then he came and told me, I want Phoebe as CEO. Phoebe was still in the government at that time, but gradually we managed to get her over to Ford, Kenya. And I brought many other women. Wangare was his favorite. He wanted Wangare to be the first vice chairman. The first vice chairman. But when we went for elections at City Hall, City Stadium, Wangare stood and stepped down, and that is how Mwite came on board, with Wamalwa as second vice chairman. I have worked with Mzee in many areas. When he was vice president, he was assigned the duty to draft the constitution of the Organization of African Unity, OAU. I'm the one who typed the document he went to present in Ethiopia, when the first OAU body sat to look at the constitution. And besides that, many other documents, he entrusted them to me because I could not let him down. And I liked working with Mzee because Mzee was very simple. You asked him a question and he will not hurry in answering you. He will tell you, I have heard what you want. You go, I'll call you. And that made it possible for each and every one of us to reach him easily. I don't mean that he was a simple person, but the way he related to us in the office was very, very peaceful, very well coordinated, and he would always consult us as young people, as small people in the office. He will say, I want you to come to the hall to hear the speech I'm going to read. And if you feel anything is missing, please feel free to contribute and do it. So I want just to affirm that Mzee mentored me in many ways. He gave me ideas. He told me a leader must have 3 hearts, one in the middle, one on the left, and one on the right. If you have an issue, a difficult issue, you must divide it into 3 portions. So if you feel you can deal with it right away, put it on your left-hand side. If you feel you want to have it the next day, store it on your right-hand side. But always keep your heart open for other issues that are coming. You should not block the flow of issues, whether they are challenging, whether they are good, whether they are bad. You must be ready to confront them in an amicable way so that the party or the program you are trying to accomplish is achieved in time.
Thank you very much.
So I say, myself being a student and mentored by Jaramogi, I am very grateful to God. And I want to thank you, the family of Yaduong, for what you have done to us up to this time. I don't see any other party I can belong to in my life unless it is ODM. And
Thank
this
you.
is my mission to you. Before I finish, because I have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, it's just
if you
time.
give me just two
Okay,
minutes more.
1 minute. 1 minute.
The work I have done in Kenya as a person was to make sure that the position of women is recognized. And that I have done throughout my life. I'm now a Moran of the Burning Spear, and the citation is my persistence in working for the development and progress of women in leadership, in economic field, in employment organizations and government. And I still want to continue doing that until my last day. I was very happy today to see the number of women leaders. One of them, the most powerful one, is sitting there. Thank you very much. I respect you and I admire you and I wish you all the best. The sky is the limit. And I know that in due course, you will be somewhere to show that leadership can be shared. And where leadership is shared, success is promised, is assured. And with those few remarks,
Thank you very much.
I want to say thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to come and participate with you and also contribute the little much I've had with the Muzee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The legs, as you can see, are failing. But the mind, you'll agree with me, is very clear, very sharp, and still going strong. Thank you, Mama Jai. Now we go to the youth in this house. Mzegitu Kahengeri is now a century old, which means he's 100 years. He lived in the struggle of Mau Mau, and he has documented recently in his autobiography that Jaramogi is one of heroes. Tell us why, Mzegitu. 5 minutes.
Mimi jina langu naitwa Kahengeri. Mimi ni freedom fighter. Nilikuwa katika vita na Waingereza kwa miaka 7. Na vita vya Mau Mau, nataka kutangaza hapa leo, havikuwa vita vya Wakikuyu. Havikuwa vita vya Wajaluo. Havikuwa vita vya Wakalenjin. Vilikuwa vita vya watu wa Kenya. Na watu hawa wa Kenya ni kutoka Namanga mpaka Moyale. na kutoka Indian Ocean mpaka Busia. Kwa hivyo hawa watu wote walikuwa freedom fighters, kwa sababu wale walikwenda msituni, walikwenda kupigana ili nchi yetu iokoke kutoka utumwa. Wale waliokwenda kanisani waliomba Mau Mau ishinde, wazungu waende kwao nyumbani. Kwa hivyo sisi tunajua vita vya ukombozi vya Mau Mau ni vita vya watu wa Kenya. Nikimaliza hivyo, sasa nitasema natoa shukrani kubwa sana kwa mji wa Jaramogi Oginga Odinga kwa sababu wa kutengeneza mkutano kama huu na kuachilia sisi ambao tulifanya kazi na yeye kuambia kitu ambacho labda hawakujua. Ni shukrani nyingi sana. Nikimaliza hivyo, nataka kusema hivi: Jaramogi Oginga Odinga alikuwa rafiki wangu wa siasa na wa kibinafsi, na vile vile alikuwa shujaa wangu, na ni shujaa wangu akiwa amekufa na wakati alipokuwa hai. Kwa hivyo maneno nitakayotoa hapa, nitatoa maneno ya rafiki wangu aliyekufa na bado mpaka sasa mimi nashikilia ya kwamba sisi tuna urafiki pamoja. I want to remind you of some of the unforgettable ideals of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, reminding you of what you already know is not a crime. Kwa hivyo mtaniwacha niendelee. Jaramogi is one of the architects of the unity of the people of Kenya, which culminated in the Mau Mau armed liberation struggle. He refused to bow to the wishes of colonialists of the colonial regime in condemnation of Jomo Kenyatta to die in prison. Jaramogi victoriously led political campaign of release Jomo Kenyatta from detention in Marela. Kenyatta was released and he became the President of the Republic of Kenya, with Jaramogi Oginga Odinga the Vice President. In his willingness and wisdom, Jaramogi successfully united KANU political members in Nyanza and in the central region to defeat KANU, a party that in the general election. KANU was supported by colonial regime. They are collaborators, they are traitors, and the notorious so-called home guards. Jaramogi firmly stood for justice and good governance. Jaramogi initiated for restoration of democracy, second liberation, supported by progressive young patriots like James Orengo, Mukisa Kitui, who are here, now Anyang Nyonge, who I can see here today, and many others who deserve recognition. Jaramogi is a confirmed patriot, progressive leader of the people of Kenya. His ideals are worth remembering and emulation. Having reminded you that, I now appeal to the young generation together with their parents. Number 8, love and help one another for peace and progress. Number 2, unite the people of Kenya. Unity is strength. Number C, embrace dialogue for any kind of dispute. Dialogue is the mother of all agreements. Sacrifice for the development of this country. You are the pillars of this nation. Use your strength similar to that of sledgehammer to fight tribalism, corruption, nepotism, any other evils destructive to our nation. You have the capacity to do that. Amen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mzee Githu Kahengeri, who stood with Jaramogi and the Odinga family. Doc, you are part of the Young Turks, and when you were invited, you said whatever was in your diary had to give way. Why?
Asante sana. I wanted to reminisce quite a bit about my experience working with Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and our time in the Second Liberation. But a lot of the strands have already been taken out. And in the interest of brevity, I'll just take 2 of the things I wanted to talk about. One is where Mzee Githu Kahengeri has just left off. Inspiring young people to work with older people for a shared purpose. The week before he died, Jaramogi invited us to his hotel room in Mombasa. Peter, you were there. Orengo, you were there. Gitobi Manyara was there. Paul Mwite was there. And one of the things that he said to us, the last conversation we had with him, he thanked us for making him feel young. You gave me young energy. And I'm very happy about that. You even added me years without feeling youthful. And the second thing, he said, always fight on when we have not reached our goals. I find this important because some of the challenge I feel we are confronting today as a country is the inadequate fusion, meeting ground between the experience of old, the energy of young, in confronting the continuing threat to our democratic order. We must look afresh at how can we rebuild the bonds between generations to deal with major challenges which are threatening to reverse the gains that people like Jaramogi Oginga Odinga fought so much for, sacrificed themselves for. The second, which really builds into that first statement for me, is Jaramogi was a study in humility but with determination. He was not a very person, but he was a very consistent and persistent person. And working with him through those years, through those intense moments, I could see a person who was saying the cause is larger than ourselves. This is important to me today because I fear there aren't enough voices in this country talking truth to authority. When young men were raided in their homes in Kondele, crashed and died later when they were taken to hospital. There was not sufficient outrage in this country. When Jaswinda Rai was abducted by agents of the state and a president started promising illegality, there was not enough outrage about that behavior. When Margaret Jakang, the control of budget, was humiliated, purportedly because of some infringement of many years earlier, we kept a similar silence. Jaramogi would not be so silent. The best way we can honor Jaramogi, speak truth to authority. We are not here by invitation. We were not given a gift of liberation. Our second liberation saw people sacrifice their lives. So people spend decades in detention. So families broken up. We cannot let persons who buy power intimidate us. And my friend, the leader of minority in parliament, the parliament of Kenya today is the most gullible since the Mulolongo parliament of the late 80s. The good news is that usually such terrible parliaments give way to liberation. Let us not make the sacrifices of silenced legislators without the gain of emboldened nationals, linking our hands, seeing every struggle as our own, seeing every infringement on the rights of Kenyans, seeing every unjustified attack on the judiciary as attacks on our order. And that if we become complacent and look the other way, Jaramogi will sit uncomfortable in his grave.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mukesa Kitui. Last but not least, those who read history know that he was not only a personal lawyer, he was a confidant. He was always there. He was an aide. And on the day he died, he was right there by bedside. And Dr. Diambol Lel, whom you guys saw in the documentary, said in Luo, when Jaramogi breathed his last, Jim, Jaduongo Bwatna, which means, Jim, Mzee slipped through my hands. Your reflections, Governor.
Thank you. The Prime Minister, Raila Odinga, and the Odinga family, Mama Susan, and the family. If I was to talk about Jaramogi, it would take a long time. But let me say, on this day, at this hour, I was at the Aga Khan Hospital. I had come on a mission where Jaramogi had instructed me to write a letter to Nelson Mandela, which he wanted to be delivered. And he wanted a meeting between him and Nelson Mandela before Mandela became the president of South Africa. Jaramogi left us in January 1994, and Mandela became president in May 1994. So it is a day I never really want sometimes to think about, because I think history today would have been different. But I'm grateful to Olaro Tunu, because the things that you said about Jaramogi, I would not want to repeat them, but because Jaramogi left us with a legacy of struggle. And I think those virtues of Jaramogi are important for us today. The virtue of wisdom, the virtue of justice, and the virtue of courage. And more importantly, when we're talking about courage, is not sheer bravery. It's more than that. And for Jaramogi, it also meant the commitment to the truth. So I would feel happy if I could say in a few words what Jaramogi desired of us, those that he left behind. And I just want to read from his own book, And by the way, if you read Not Yet Uhuru, I want you to read the introduction by Jaramogi, read the preface by Kwame Nkrumah, and what I call a preamble and a dedication. These three parts of Jaramogi's book are very important, thinking about the struggle today. And this is what Jaramogi said in this seminal book about the time. And I quote, when the political temperature, I may paraphrase in order to shorten, when the political temperature was highest, the youth and the women were the greatest single force of our struggle and its nerve center. The women created the political consciousness, and I'm grateful for what Jan Mbogo is saying. The women created the political consciousness which sent the people to the polls, and it is they who voted to sweep our first independence government to power. The youth and women galvanized the people on whose support we rode to victory. They were never afraid of bullets, tear gas, or jail. And then in his dedication in this book, what does he say? And I quote, I dedicate this book, the story of my life and political struggle, to the youth of Kenya, my country. As the spirit of the youth carried us through our hardest days in the fight for independence, so on the youth, the youth will shape our new country, Kenya. So, looking at the struggle from 1994, without the youth, I think we would not have been where we are today. Without the women, I don't think we would be where we are today. And I want to repeat that it is true that when there were meetings about the leadership of Ford, Jaramogi's preferred candidate was Wangari Maathai. And you remember, to the end, in the elections that came, Wangari Maathai still advocated for Jaramogi to become the third president of the Republic of Kenya. Now, when you talk about courage, I have never seen somebody of that age so courageous. I remember an incident that when we went to Garissa for a political meeting, and we carried all the political heavyweights to Garissa, including Martin Shikuku, Kimani Wanyoike, Dennis Akumu, Buya, and at the airport in Garissa, the military said we could not go through to go and hold a political meeting in Garissa. And when one of the people in Garissa offered a combi which found its way into the military, into the airport, some of us, whom I shall not mention, refused to enter that pickup. But Martin Shikuku was always very loud, sat at the back of the, of the combi. And Jaramogi, of all the people who sat on the front, and he ordered the driver to drive through the gate and the barrier that the military had put there. And we managed to pass through and get to Garissa town and held a meeting. And I remember Abuya crying that, oh, I've been hit by a stone. Damu inatoka kwa mkono yangu. And Jaramogi said, unataka itoke maji. And we ended up having a very successful meeting on that day. The second thing, if you read the book between what Nkrumah says and what Jaramogi says, is that on issues of principles, we should be steadfast. We should steadfast. And he cries in that book that the independence government was taken over by people who did not believe in the struggle. And today in Kenya, and I'm sorry, my friend Korea is here, and you're my very good friend. If you look at Kenya today, part of the problem that we have today is that those who are in power were never part of the struggle. And in this, we face a lot of challenges, and we must rededicate the struggle in Kenya to make sure that the progressive movement attains what Jaramogi desired of us, and is never too late. And I thank Raila Odinga being steadfast in keeping this flame of freedom burning all the time. And I know it can be done. The other thing that I remember about Jaramogi, and this is the last point, I think we are tired and late. There's a time when through Job Omino, he had organized for a meeting in London between him and Tiny Rowland to ask for funds for the campaign. And Tiny Rowland used to run a hotel in London with Mohammed Gaddafi. As soon as we got to that hotel, Jaramogi, instead of just asking for a contribution, he went straight and told Tiny Rowland that you people have exploited Africa and you have nothing to show. And the worst is that Mozambique, Rhodesia, what is Zimbabwe now, and Zambia could have become independent countries if Londro, East Africa, had not engaged with the reactionary forces, particularly in Mozambique. Now, when Tiny Rowland walked out, and I was trying to whisper to him, Jaduong, Koroki wacha motango ayudu pasa nenade. To owacha na to ko tamre okowe nyakwanyi said here. So when Tiny Rowland came back, he told him, I know you're Moi's friend. I will not stop you from giving him a contribution. But you must also give us a contribution because you know we are the ones who stand for the truth. And a testimony to that, when Jaramogi died, Tiny Rowland was here, to say bye-bye to Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. So this is a life that is very difficult to replicate, but I think the legacy lives, and Kenya is in the right trajectory if we follow the footsteps of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Governor Orengo. I'll ask now the panelists, with the exception of Archbishop Okoth, to remain, and the rest can say it. Indeed, the political shadow of Jaramogi looms large from what we have seen today, from the talk we have had today, and from the aspirations that people still have. The program says that we should have the closing prayer, but I know you would stone me out of this podium if I went and said that Archbishop Okoth now give the closing prayer. And therefore, because of that, I want to invite the only one, the Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, to come and wrap up what has been a momentous day. And therefore, let's be upstanding as he comes to give
the closing and wrap-up remarks. Karibu. Baba.
Hiya. Hiya. You may be seated. I know you guys are now tired, but I am not going to make a speech. I just want first to thank those who have spared their time to come here and share their views about Jaramogi with us today. I want to thank our friend, Dr. Lara Otunu, who has come all the way from Uganda to be with us here. And those who joined us virtually from outside the country, we thank them. And those who have been here in the panel here, we thank them. Also those who have given keynote speeches here. Now, from what they have all said, you can say that it is like the 7 people who went to find out, those blind people who went to find out what an elephant looks like. From what they all said, actually a picture has emerged of Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. As a family, we thank everybody for sparing their time to come and be here today. This event would have been held 3 years ago, but because of the COVID, we decided to postpone it. And today was so important because this is the 30th anniversary of Jaramogi, why we decided that it must be held here today. Jaramogi was very many things, a very versatile character, very engaging when you want to talk to him, but very simple. It was very, very simple. We remember when we were growing up here in this town, Jaramogi just used to wear kinyasa and a color shoes. That was his standard dress in town. That's how he was known. And that is how he even went up to Legico. You will see, if you read the Note of Uhuru, there is a place where they were now discussing the dress, Jaramogi's dress in Bunge, how he should get into Bunge. Eventually he won that and was able to be going to Bunge without having to put up a tie. So but growing up as children, you know, he had been a teacher. And therefore he was very, very strict with us as children. He wanted us to grow up like any other native children around. And we had it very rough, me and Oburu here, as children. But now, in retrospect, we are grateful to him that by treating us like ordinary people, we grew up as true Kenyans, and we therefore understood the problems the ordinary peasant children were experiencing in the rural areas. We were removed from schools here in Kisumu and taken back to a rural school down there. We lost 2 years of our education because of transfer from Kisumu to the rural home there. Because when we went there, they said we were too small to go to standard 3. So we had to go and start again in standard 1. But that was okay for us. We think that it was a good experience. It prepared us for life in the future. But Jaramogi, this other aspect of Jaramogi which has not been properly appreciated. Jaramogi the teacher. Jaramogi really wanted people to get education. And he spent a lot of his time and a lot of his money trying to promote education among the Kenyans. At the time he died, there were 54 children in different stages of education. Some were in nursery, primary, secondary, and university, whom he was sponsoring. We decided as a family to ensure that all those children would get education in accordance with their abilities. And through the foundation, we raised money and we ensured that all the 54 children Jaramogi was sponsoring got education. It was a time when there was nothing like CDF. But we managed to ensure that these children got education. Some we sent abroad to universities in honor of Jaramogi. But he had started this thing much earlier. When he resigned from teaching in Maseno and came and set up a business here, he was helping very many students who wanted to go abroad. And when he now became the chairman of the Care of Luo Union, he now actually institutionalized it. Very many students who went abroad in those days got support from Luo Union. And when he went on a trip, he had been invited to go to India. What happened is Jaramogi had constructed a building in the center of the town here. He called it Ramogi House. And that building was completed in 1951. So in 1952, he invited the governor. He wrote a letter to the governor through the PC to come and officially launch or open the building. The reply came back that the town center is not for Africans, natives. That Africans should go and build in the native reserves. The town center is only for Europeans and Asians. So that is in Note to Uhuru, you can read it there. So after that rejection, he now wrote to the Indian High Commission. By that time, India had attained independence and had posted a High Commissioner here in Nairobi who was representing the whole of Eastern Africa. It was called Sir Apa Sahib Pant. So Apa Sahib Pant accepted the invitation to come. So he came here to Kisumu to open the building. And when he looked at the building, he was so impressed that he said that people who are still struggling under colonial oppression can put up a building like this. He invited Jaramogi to go to India to see how Indians are working to reconstruct their country after independence. And that is how Jaramogi traveled to India. And in India, he spent 2 months in India. He traveled the length and the breadth of India, met so many people, the Minister of Education, the Minister for Culture, the Minister for Industries. He toured from Bombay to Delhi, to Bangalore, to Chennai, to Calcutta, to Srinagar, all part of India. Some by train, by road, by air. And when he came back, he wrote a book in Luo. It was called Dueche Areo e India. 2 months in India. He recorded everything that he had seen in India. That book was later on translated by an Indian friend of him, Ambubai Patel, into English. And the copies are available there. You can buy them. 2 months in India are available there. Noted Huru is also available there. Flames of Freedom is also available there. Anybody who wants can buy. In that book, he was so impressed. He met with the then Indian Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. And they had long discussions. And he signed an agreement there with the Indian government that he could send Kenyan students to go and study in India. So long as they get transport to go to India, they would get Indian government scholarship to study for free in Indian universities. So Jaramogi then came here and recruited Kenyans to go and study in India. He opened an office in that building called Jivan Bharat building, where the Indian High Commission was, and put a Kenyan who had come from India at that time called Olwandi Kodul as the secretary. To that scholarship program, many Kenyans went to study in India. From 1953, 4, 5, 6, all that. People like from here, I can give you some names. Odongo Mamu, Omolo Kero, Tomo Kelo Dongo, Odero Joey, Akoko Mboya, Mauro Keyo, and out there, Joe Karanja, who became the first High Commissioner in London, Vice Chancellor of University of Nairobi, and Vice President. Henry Waridi, the first Member of Parliament for Mukurweini. Kalembe Ndile was an MP for somewhere in Ukambani. Omoto Kibwezi. Omoto Masahalia was Masahalia. We used to live together with him. Here he was working at Lutheran near here company. S.M. Otieno. All those were students who Jaramogi sent to study in India. This is long before airlift. So the Indian package was much earlier than the airlift. And the airlift only had about 300 people. But then after that, when Jaramogi traveled to the Eastern European countries, first Jaramogi had gone on to attend a conference in Tokyo, Japan, a World Peace Conference. When he was at that conference in Tokyo, he met with the Chinese delegation. The Chinese delegation invited him to go and visit China, and he accepted. That is how Jaramogi went to the East. When he went to China, they went first to Shanghai. From Shanghai, they went to Peking, those days, now Beijing. And he met with Mao Zedong and Xu Enlai. And they had discussions, and they arranged for him to go to other parts of China to go and see how China were working to develop their country, Chinese. He went to several provinces of China. From there, they arranged for him to go to Moscow. By that time, the Chinese and the Russians had not disagreed. So they're the ones who made arrangement for him to go and meet with Nikita Khrushchev, then the president of the Soviet Union, in Moscow. So he went from Peking to Moscow and had discussions with the leadership of Soviet Union. First, in Beijing, they agreed to support the liberation movement in Kenya. In Moscow also, they agreed to support the liberation movement in Kenya. From Moscow, he flew to London. At Heathrow Airport, the immigration saw the stamp of Peking. They did not mind about Moscow, but Peking, the Red China. So he went to China, yes. He was holding a British passport. At that time, everybody was a British subject. and the British citizens were not supposed to go to Red China. So the guy just did not say anything, but noted and I think reported to the immigration. He went into the town. But from there, when he came back to Nairobi and landed at Jomo Kenyatta Airport now, then Embakasi Airport, the passport was impounded. They took away the passport. They did not give any reasons. So there was a headline, Jaramogi's passport impounded. So the matter was raised in the Legico, and there was a long debate over it. The majority of members of parliament at that time were white, and they were saying how Jaramogi was playing about with fire. One was called Group Captain Briggs, one was Sir Michael Blundell, one was called N.S. Basi. And all of them were condemning Jaramogi and saying that Jaramogi was playing with what he did not understand. He who rode on the back of the tiger ended inside the stomach of the tiger. So one said, Mr. Odinga should know that men much more intelligent than him have tried and have failed, and he will fail. So when Jaramogi rose to respond, he told the gentlemen who were talking that, look, even me, before I went to China, I was as ignorant as you people about China. But what I saw in China was an eye-opener to me. China is the country with the biggest population in the world. At that time, 540 million people. But in China, I did not see any people walking naked. Everyone was clothed. In China, I did not see people who are unemployed. Everybody was employed. In China, I did not see people hungry. Everybody was eating. China was able to feed 540 million people. We have no beggars in China. So if that is what's communism, then communism is food. It's like food. That's what Jaramogi said. You can see it in the Hansard. Tomorrow, headline East African Standards. Communism, my food, says Odinga. How Jaramogi and the tag of being a communist. Jaramogi never studied Marxism-Leninism at all. He did not. But Jaramogi was just being realistic at that time. Now what he did, he negotiated scholarships with those countries for Kenyans. At that time, it was not easy to get a passport if you are going to study in those countries. So the Kenyans who had moved out and had been denied opportunity to go and study in Rome, and they had gone by foot through Uganda and through South Sudan to Khartoum, negotiated and opened an office in Khartoum, and then went also up to Cairo and opened an office. Jaramogi met them, and through that connection, he opened an office in Cairo, and he was able to meet the Egyptian president, Mr. Nasser. But I wanted to tell you that when his passport was impounded here, he got a passport, international passport from Kwame Nkrumah, president of Ghana. Another one from Gamal Abdel Nasser, president of Egypt. So he had 2 international passports. So he went there, and in Cairo they set up an office operated by the late William Odhiambo Kelo, Werambitho, and Abdallah Karungo. Then they opened up another office in London, operated by Otiego Thiel. In London, Nkrumah bought a building called Africa Unity House, which building he dedicated to the liberation struggle on Africa. And all Africans who had a problem in London could go and stay in that building. And he asked Jaramogi to give him somebody to manage that building. Jaramogi gave him a Kenyan who had been a student in London and had not come back, called Otiego Thiel, became the manager of Africa Unity House. So now the Cairo office was the one that was liaising with all these countries: Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Romania, the Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, and China and so on, about scholarships. So Kenyans usually needed to get to Cairo. From Cairo, you now be able to travel to get a scholarship to study for free in all those countries. Through that program, there were 5,000 Kenyans managed to study in the university. That was Jaramogi's initiative, which has never been recognized or appreciated, because people highlight only the 300 or so people who were taken by airlift and from Mbagazi to New York. But there's nothing, it's a drop in the water of the ocean by comparison to many Kenyans who studied through Jaramogi's initiative. First in India, then in those other countries, then in the UK, in the United States. People like Hilary Ngweno studied in Harvard. It was sponsored by Jaramogi. Washington Jalango Kumu was sponsored by Jaramogi to go and study in Harvard. Jaramogi sent very many students to the United States also, and also to other West African countries, Ghana, Egypt, and so on and so forth. This is an aspect of Jaramogi's contribution that has never been appreciated, and I wanted this to also go on record. Jaramogi as an educator. So therefore, I really want to thank you all for coming to help us remember Jaramogi. Asanteni sana. Mungu awabariki.